So, hi, I'm Dawn Hughes. I'm an editor at booktrib.com, where readers come to discover. And I'd like to welcome you to another Booktrib live author interview. He has been referred to as the face of NASA mission control. Eugene Kranz is best known as leader of the Tiger Team flight controllers who returned the damaged Apollo 13 spaceship safely back to Earth on April 17, 1970. He was portrayed by Ed Harris in the 1995 movie Apollo 13, awesome movie. He joined NASA back in 1960. He assumed flight director duties for the Project Gemini and Apollo missions, including leading the controller team for America's first lunar landing during Apollo 13 in 1969. In 1983, Eugene assumed NASA Director of Mission Operations, overseeing a workforce of more than 5,000. After serving in mission control for over 100 launches and effectively overseeing the complete arc of U.S. manned space missions, Eugene retired in 1994, turning to motivational speaking and writing. His latest book, Tough and Competent, chronicles his career and offers valuable lessons in leadership and team chemistry. Welcome, Gene. It's great to speak with you today. I have to tell you, I am a closet NASA enthusiast. I wanted to go to space camp when I was a kid.
I think that's great, and I'm very glad to be able to speak to you this morning. You know, it's interesting many years later to address the challenges we met in space, and we had a technological challenge this morning trying to get on the proper link to work here, but we're communicating, and that's what's important. If I was in mission control, I would have had to turn to the left of my flight director's console and say, Inco, what's going on with the comm? Sort out the problems.
So real life problems still coming true today.
Yes.
You're still battling technological problems, so it's okay. I want to read to you a quote from longtime and since deceased NASA veteran Arnold Aldrich. It was as tough a test as could be conceived and put to flight control. If there was any weakness, the team would have crumbled. The teams dealt with IT. There is no way that you could have a team stand up the way we did. Tell us, what is Arnold referring to, and describe that situation to us?
Arnie is really talking about the challenge we faced during Apollo 13. We had the spacecraft explosion. We're about 200,000 miles from Earth, 50,000 miles from the surface of the moon. And we now had to convert the damaged spacecraft, our reentry spacecraft, into a lifeboat for the crew. And this was 4 days, 4 total days of stress. And it was where the team commitment to each other and to the crew brought out our fight to win and accomplished the impossible return of the crew. By all sense, this mission was not recoverable. The crew wasn't recoverable, but the team stepped up to it. Basically, the team chemistry, the task chemistry, and the social chemistry of the organization that we developed over the years in our power programs, and it really paid off in Apollo 13.
I'll say I got goosebumps just listening to you talk about that. Talk about a high pressure situation for sure.
Well, it was this was why I wrote the second book, really, because the first book was about the technical challenge, but it was about hardware and software. It wasn't about people. And that's what Tough and Competent is. It gave me the opportunity to talk about the people who made things happen in the place called mission control.
Tough and Competent, speaking of the book, which is such a great title for a book, by the way, documents the leadership and teamwork principles which emerged from an organization of novice, part-time engineers in NASA Mercury Control. By July 1969, when faced with stress that you described of the Apollo 11 mission, they matured into a group of hardened individuals empowered to make split-second decisions to land with only 17 seconds of fuel remaining. I can't even imagine how stressful that was. But that maturation process doesn't happen overnight. Describe how it came about.
It was a relatively long process, but it began with Project Mercury. In Project Mercury, I had led fighter groups over in Korea. I had basically run a flight test program out of Helmand Air Force Base with the B-52, which is the first major jet bomber. And I had the experience of leading a team in complex high-risk enterprises. At the completion of Project Mercury, I recognized we had a team of rookies. They were new recruits. I called them hired hands. And after the program was over, I looked at the future in the Mercury and the Gemini and the Apollo programs, and recognized we had to become a highly professional team with leadership at all levels in the organization. Our challenge was we're going to do something that had never been done before. We're going to put man in space. We're going to expect them to rendezvous, dock with other spacecraft, perform extravehicular operations. And none of this had ever been done before. So our process of learning to do this work was to write all the books and the manuals, to establish the training program. And this provided the base for the knowledge. We worked together and once we moved to Houston, in a empty warehouse floor. So basically, our daily work was accomplished in an environment where everyone was working with each other, both contractors and civil servants, managers, and basically the rookies. And in that kind of an environment, it was really a melting pot where we established a mutual trust that we needed to accomplish the program we were setting out for. Our early missions provided the opportunities to gain experience with the technologies of space, the fuel cells, computers, propulsion, navigation, communications. And then we got burned several times. We had a mission that would arrive, the Gemini 8 mission, where it was an emergency. The crew was running out of orbital fuel, and we used part of our reentry fuel, and we had to bring them down in the West Pacific. It was the only contingency landing that we made in the entire space program, but it was very successful because this team had already started this process of building the relationship we need to do impossible things. We also learned that our approach towards extravehicular operation wasn't any good. We were unable to complete our spacewalks on 3 successive missions. And the scientists, the program came to us and said, hey, why don't you try training your crews for EVA in a huge swimming pool? And that way we could replicate the challenge of working in zero gravity. But this was the process by which we became capable of stepping up to even greater challenges and risks in the Apollo program.
That whole process, is that what you would call the IT, capital I, capital T?
That was it. It's interesting. In the process of writing the book, I kept saying the same statements over and over about leadership.
Right.
And I found this quote from Aldrich that was on the 20th anniversary of the Apollo 13 mission. And that got me searching of what is the science and what is the soul of team chemistry? How does it come together?
Right.
And I found a great book written by Joan Ryan. She was a baseball writer, and she wrote about the Yankees. She lived in the dugouts during games at times, and this basically allowed me to better understand this chemistry of a group of very young people coming together under intense risk with high stakes and establishing the technical and social relationships necessary to achieve a goal. We found and developed the capability and the belief that of unity, that if one fails, we all fail.
Right.
This is the same capabilities I have as a fighter pilot flying over the Taiwan Straits. And as I said, it began on a bare warehouse floor that all of the people, we didn't have any barriers of office walls and that kind of stuff. Literally, this was a giant showroom down there. And basically, everything that was happening became part of this potpourri of experience that we're exchanging as we learn things. The eureka, somebody found something, made a discovery, learned about something new, so he told other people. So it was just a marvelous way to go. And then as we matured in our capabilities, we developed a set of values. It was called the foundations. And believe it or not, 50 years later, I have the same set of foundations that are on conference room walls. It's in the books. It talks about discipline, competence, confidence, responsibility, toughness, and teamwork. And these are the tools to achieve professional excellence in our working space.
I would say that that's also the tools that you need for any organization, which I think is the foundation for tough and competent, right?
That is correct. It applies. It's really amazing. The foundations we've talked about, I've seen in operating rooms in hospitals.
Right.
I've seen them in many critical industries where process and flow and schedule is a major component of their job. They're doing things that weren't easy, and they're doing it for the first time. The
Yeah.
foundations are the baseline for our success in spaceflight.
You touched on a number of those things that, teamwork and innovation that help the space program be a success. Would you say that you have additional lessons that you learned, that things that you would like to impress on others now to how to make this IT work?
I think there's many lessons there, but I think it starts off with accountability. If one of us fails, we all fail.
Right.
We had this common set of performance expectations for not only the leaders, but all the people working in the environment. I think it's important for everybody doing a tough job to know who they are and what are their strengths and weaknesses. One of the terms I use in my book, I talk about a wingman. I had one over Korea that always made sure that when I was attacking other aircraft, no one was attacking me. And I had a wingman in every role I ever performed in mission control. I had a what call an assistant flight director. He looked after what was I doing, and he provided a check and balance. In general the office, I used the wingman as my conscience. Was I doing something that wasn't right?
Yeah.
Leadership lasts a lifetime, and you have to really get to know the people that you're working with. And with this leadership lasting a lifetime, reputation is the essential supporting element to become a top level leader.
I'm sure when those are all great points in how to include those lessons in creating an effective organization. I'm sure that over the years you also realized some things that didn't work. What are some of the signs of that an organization can look for to know when they're not able to accomplish their goal? Are there some common mistakes we should be looking for?
Well, I think that the personnel issues provide the greatest challenge to organizations. And I learned very rapidly in my role as branch, division, and director that there is no such thing as a small personnel problem.
Mm.
Personnel problems you have to address immediately. You have to address really looking at both sides of the issue that exists and make sure it isn't a leadership challenge or is it something that we didn't communicate properly. I think that my greatest challenges occurred later in my career when there's organizational chaos at the very top level. We had management turnover, personnel reassignments, changing directions. And basically, when things didn't make sense, I had to learn to trust my gut and make a stand based upon my beliefs. Uh, time is a principal asset. And it was really the management of time was one thing that I got pretty good at based on my flight test experience. I think
Yeah.
it's important to seek help when you need help. I had the secretary that's been with me for over 50 years right now. She still does my correspondence. And she was my wingman through some very difficult times in my space work.
It shows you're an effective leader that she's been around for 50 years. That's
Well,
excellent. I think the what you're talking about, your career was a very high stress, dangerous, lives could have been lives were on in the balance all the time. But I think the lessons, regardless of how high level risk your job is, still apply. And I think one thing is when you're passionate about something, you're always the ability to be stressed. How did you navigate stress, and does the book talk about any of those sorts of strategies, coping strategies?
I think the book's good from that standpoint because stress was a element of our job, and we had to learn to deal with it.
Right.
One of the major challenges we had to face up to was fatigue in the organization. And every person in the organization was required to basically have a flight quality physical every year. And in the process of that physical, they learned to develop healthy habits. We worked not 12 hours a day or 14 hours a day, it was 24/7 during the mission. And to a great extent, preparation for the mission, it was 24/7.
Right.
So we had a variety of stresses that came not from our work, but from our environment at home. So we had to address those challenges with our people and recognize when they needed to take some time off. Every controller in my organization, I had 4 levels of review. It was their immediate supervisor, then the training supervisors we had. I had a flight surgeon on each one of my teams, and I had a flight director. So if any one of those individuals saw a personnel issue of any type, basically we addressed it. We could do it easily, sometimes by just making a short-term assignment change, moving them to a different job, or just plain going down to them and say, hey, you need some time off, take it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This may seem like a basic question, but I think it's important, especially for our audience. Why did you write Tough and Competent? Who is it written for?
It was really written, my first book, Failure is Not an Option, was technical. And in the process of preparing that book, I really took out the personnel, the issues, the people that made things happen. There's a statement that is in hockey, no one wins alone. I was a hockey fan, and this really points out the role of supporting people in the organization, giving them the responsibility, holding them accountable. I first learned about this over in Korea when I'd be leading a flight of aircraft in a hostile environment. I found it very quickly in my jobs in flight test that basically if we had a problem turning the aircraft around, it might be a very small one, but if we talked it over, debriefed, we figured out why it happened and how it happened and what we should be doing different. We're able to accomplish more than one flight a day.
Right.
Basically, the other thing is writing this book here, I learned a lot about the people that I worked with and for. So I provided a vignette, a real short story, and who they were and where they came from. And I found very quickly that their background, that I call dirty hands, they had worked at some job that provided a ethic for work and a feel for work and a feel for working with other people there. That was very important. The other thing I also found out and I wrote about it in my book, is I did not have a car when I was going to college, and I would hitchhike from Toledo, Ohio to St. Louis University. And I would ride in the cab of truck drivers, and truck drivers talk to stay awake.
Right.
So they picked you up, and as soon as you got on their cab, they started talking to you, and they never stopped talking for hours at a time. But it was really an interesting thing. I learned about my people and some of the things in my life that I had overlooked when I wrote Tough and Competent.
That's fascinating. You probably could have named the book many things. How did you settle on Tough and Competent?
Tough and Competent was came about after the Apollo 1 fire. I had a group of very young people. I was in aviation flight test. I saw people die. I experienced death. And as a team in mission control during Apollo 1, when that fire in the launch pad occurred, people were going through an entirely different life experience that they had ever faced before.
Yeah.
And what I had to do was to create the mindset as they left my briefing room after discussing the fire that this would never happen again. They had to develop the frame of mind that says, I am accountable for everything that I do, and I will be knowledgeable of that everything I do is correct.
Fascinating. Well, the book obviously contains fascinating anecdotes from your experiences, and I can't wait to read them all, actually. How can people best use your book as a guide to help them improve their management skills?
I was helped in writing my book, not in the words, but in structuring the book. I had a very good editor. And basically, as we were going through the final layouts and proofreading the book, she said, you got some awfully good lessons in here. I think we ought to take them out and make them stand apart from the chapters where they are. And she called them lessons in leadership, lessons in guidance, lessons in team building. And it was very interesting to go through it and read the book with a different set of eyes now.
Right.
I was seeing what a reader should see, but it had been brought out to make it easy. So she brought these out, separated from the chapters, highlighted them, and that was one of the real lessons I learned. That sometimes when I talk, I basically basically pass over things that are very important. And I think the editor helped me learn a lot about writing a book.
What do you hope readers take away from this when they're done?
This book to me was very personable, and I hope that as they're reading, they feel they're just across the table from me and we're both drinking a cup of coffee. And I think it's just to recognize that I found a lot about my people through writing this book. And I believe every person has the ability to write a book. It would be good for them to sit down, establish a journal, and basically carry that. What have they learned? What are the lessons that learned? What did they learn about the people? What would they do differently? So basically, this was my opportunity to talk to them very personally and drink a cup of coffee together.
Love it. Well, I certainly think that's a noble goal. That is all the time that we have for today. So thank you, Eugene, for joining us. The book is Tough and Competent. Please be sure to check it out. I'm Dawn Hughes, and we'll see you next time.